So this is my prompt. Researchers have found that juveniles with low levels of self-control are high risk for engaging in delinquency. How is self-control measured? And discuss the reasons why low self-control is likely to increase the risk of engaging in deviant behavior. What is self-control? So self-control is the ability to manage personal impulses, behaviors, and emotions. And being able to control these things helps us to achieve our goals and to solve different problems we might face in our day-to-day lives. So this ability is rooted in the prefrontal cortex, which is the making choices and planning part of our brains. There's a certain richness to our nerves and their connections, and this prefrontal cortex we have allows us to plan and evaluate. So when we use self-control, we can stop ourselves from doing action we might later regret. Self-control is important because our choices and actions can lead to extensive negative consequences, as well as minor negative ones. So self-control has to do with conscientiousness, and this is a personality trait of carefulness or diligence that we might have. And when someone lacks this self-control, it often means that they're trying to suppress the immediate urge to consume. And that means that they're, hoping to get some sort of gratification or fulfillment out of what they're doing, and they could possibly later regret it. And yeah. How is self-control measured? So self-control can usually be measured by surveys or allocation scenarios, and allocation scenarios can determine how products or groups will react to an action. So it's basically a model scenario, and subjects will be measured on how they react, and we can sort of gauge what their level of self-control is. And from these surveys, we can also find that self-control can gradually worsen, and over time, we can gradually lack more and more control. Um, every individual has a level of self-control, and it goes deeper into our personality structure and who we are overall as people. And this is a quote that I found in one of the articles that I was researching. Um, Individuals' differences in self-control relate to deep differences in overall. Oh, I passed. Okay, so measuring self-control and its effects. So it takes self-control to say no to do something that sounds good, but is actually not morally good or morally responsible. So typically, people will measure their self-control in personal ways, and they will measure it based on how it will affect them in their life. So people who want to accumulate wealth or status make sure to hold on to their self-control because it's important. And people who do not necessarily care about wealth and this status, they will have less self-control. Low self-control is likely to lead to this deviant behavior because the person has little to no care about consequences or how the situation could affect them or themselves. And the thing about self-control is it's gradual. It can be a minor break in the rules, but in turn lead to serious delinquent behavior. And a good example of that would be maybe a friend trying to convince you to steal money from your mom. And while it may sound good in the moment, it is not morally responsible to take the money. And so it can start off as something minor like that, but then in turn become something a little more serious and a little more, morally unresponsible. All right, so this is actually a pretty interesting thing that I came across while I was researching. So it took place in 1968 to 1974, and Walter Mischel, he was a scientist, and him and a few of his collaborators at Stanford University ran an experiment offering cookies to 554-year-olds, and these 4-year-olds were children of different students or professors at Stanford. Each child was asked whether he or she would prefer to have 1 or 2 cookies, and because they're children, the universal preference was for 2, and the psychologist that was there with them would then leave the room, and the child was told that in order to get both of the cookies they wanted, they would have to wait until the psychologist had returned back to the room. The child also had the option of calling the psychologist back into the room prematurely and receiving only 1 cookie rather than 2 because they didn't want to wait. After 20 minutes, the psychologist would re-enter the room and give out 2 cookies to the kids who had decided to wait the full time. So this just goes to show that it's about, what you care about. The children who wanted 2 cookies decided they were going to wait, and then there were kids who decided they only wanted 1 so they wouldn't have to wait. And this also goes to show that our self-control is deeply rooted in us, even when we were, young as 4 years old making decisions. It's been prevalent in our lives since we were younger. All right, so this slide is going to be about outside influences. So while our self-control has a lot to do with our personality does stem from our background, our surroundings, the environment where we come from, and the people we're around. And studies have shown the connection between these emotions that we have and our experiences in our life to our levels of self-control. So they're all contributors. So an individual's background can have influence on their level of self-control and their emotions, and could explain a lot of their personality and why they are the way they are. Our environment can affect us and the choices we make, and this means our friends or our family, mutual people we know. If we are consistently around people who make trouble and can easily convince or sway us to do things we would not normally do, we would probably have a harder time holding on to our self-control. And this is a quote from another article that I found while I was researching. Most serious chronically delinquent children and adolescents experience a number of risk factors at various levels. And what that means is that kids who come from maybe a broken home or just different backgrounds like that will probably be more likely to indulge in a life of delinquency because of their lack of self-control. This is just because of the influences they've been around. It almost makes it easy, I guess I would say, to become a part of that lifestyle, and their surroundings play a big role. And I want to reiterate that the personality is important, personal personality, individuality, but a lot of that does stem from the outside influences and the different things in our life that we surround ourselves with. So this is my conclusion and just some points that I thought were the most important. So low levels of self-control can lead to involvement in delinquent activity, and self-control goes hand in hand with care. So the more you care about something, whether it's your status or your wealth or who you need to talk to, what you need to get done, how you're going to benefit yourself, it goes hand in hand with how you're going to control yourself. There are other factors that can lead to not having a lot of self-control, and they intertwine and can eventually lead someone down a bad path. So this goes back to the previous slide, just about outside influences and how they affect a person. So self-control becomes a problem gradually because we can slowly start to lose our self-control in more serious and consequential situations. And again, that means over time we're going to develop, a comfortability to not having a lot of self-control, which will then lead us to becoming more comfortable with doing things we shouldn't be doing and engaging in that delinquent behavior. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry, the timing was kind of messed up. I had a very difficult time figuring this out. But I enjoyed researching this topic, and I hope you got to learn something from it. Those are my sources. Thank you so much, and have a good night.